Don't worry about China, it will all be fine. This is US President Donald Trump's latest message after his threat of imposing 100% tariffs on China on Friday sent markets into meltdown. His comments managed to claw back some of Wall Street's losses, but Asian markets tumbled upon opening Monday over fears of a reignited trade war. In response to President Trump's tariff threat, China has said it does not want a trade war, but is not afraid of one, vowing to take resolute countermeasures if the tariff hikes go ahead. Now, this comes on the back of a series of countermeasures by China in response to a whole host of U.S. measures targeting China rolled out since the latest round of bilateral trade consultation in Spain last month. Now, what have fueled these latest escalations by the two sides? How to understand China's firm responses, which China calls passive or legitimate defense? And how could things play out ahead of APEC Summit in the Republic of Korea? Welcome to The Point with me, Liu Xin, an opinion show coming to you from Beijing. I'm pleased to be joined from Beijing by Zhang Xiaoyan, Associate Dean of Tsinghua PBC School of Finance, from Portland, American by Liang Yan, Kremer Chair Professor of Economics at Willamette University, and from Shanghai by Joseph Mahoney, Professor at East China Normal University. The warmest welcome to all of you. So let's take a look at the market reaction. After President Trump floated the 100% tariff threats on China, the S&P 500, the Dow Jones, and the NASDAQ all dropped sharply. But U.S. markets rebounded slightly after President Trump said, don't worry about China, it will all be fine. Associate Dean Zhang, tell us about the reaction. How do you read the reactions on the stock markets? Are we seeing a deja vu when President Trump first started the tariff war on China during his second term?
Okay. Well, thank you for the question, and thank you for having us here. From the global capital market point of view, it doesn't matter whether it's the U.S. market or Chinese market, we are all part of a global capital market. So when the series of events happening on Friday with several turns from the China side and from the U.S. side, a lot of clarifications, a lot of discussions, I think the first message is the global capital market, especially represented by United States, take this as a negative signal. That's why we saw overall last week, on Friday, the price has been dropping by 2 to 3%. All the major indices are going down by 2 to 3% because any trade tensions between China and United States is going to be a negative signal for the global capital market. And that's why on Friday, you see a lot of turbulence, a lot of, going down and up and down, mostly down again in the U.S. market, which is the largest country market of the world. That's number one. And number two, I want to also highlight that the Chinese stock market is part of the global market, but it is very different from United States. So from the Monday data, we saw that the drop in the Chinese market, there is drop at the very beginning, and then there's going back again, which means that people over the weekend, they start to realize there is a negotiation going on. There are a lot of things moving, and we're not at the ending stage. And people are reconsidering, we may take it as a negative signal, but maybe, the two players, China and United States, they're not reaching their final conclusions yet. And also China is very resilient starting from last year. Our investors are picking up on confidence. So the Chinese market is not dropping as much as in United States. In fact, in some indices on Monday, you can actually see that they actually go up. So I want to say that people are becoming more rational. They see this is not the final decision. We're still in the middle of the talk, and there are a lot of uncertainties, but we're not there yet. It's different.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when last time the stock market tumbled, the Chinese stock market also crashed, I would say, as much bigger losses for the individual investors. But this time it was really quite mild. Professor Liang Yan, let me go to you. How do you look at, again, we're seeing first President Trump, threatening to impose 100% new tariffs on top of what has already been slapped on Chinese goods. And then over the weekend, he seemed to have walked back, and some people are saying the tackle president once again. Was it done intentionally? Did he really take the opportunity of China's countermeasures and, play this whole, I'm going to be tough to have more bargaining chip game again?
Yeah, good to be with you, Liu Xin. So first of all, I think the intention is still difficult to gauge at this point. There's always the debate whether or not Trump is doing this because he wants to pump and dump, right? That there was always talking down the market, but then when the insiders are able to buy on the dip, then he will talk it up again and benefit from this. But on the other hand, I think this is a very jerk-knee reaction that we have seen over and over again. That Trump likes to have this one-trick pony, right? That when he is triggered, he likes to double down on the tariff rate and also sanctions, right? He mentioned about all the critical software will be subject to some kind of export control. And so I think that is very clear that this is Trump's model operandi, that he likes to double down on these measures and trying to maximize the pressure to gain the largest leverage. That said, as you just mentioned, that it seems that he walked back because of clearly the stock market sent a signal this is not the way to go. And also, I think this time around, China's resolute countermeasure also signals China's resolve to really increase its leverage power as well, going into the potential Xi and Trump talk at the sideline of APEC.
Well, let's talk about what triggered all of the tantrum, if I may use this word. What we know, for instance, is what kind of countermeasures that China undertook on October the 9th, during which China published 7 notices on the issue of trade-related measures, including announcing export control measures on super hard metals, rare earths, and battery-related items. China also launched countermeasures against U.S. port fees, which are particularly targeting China or China-related vessels or ships. And on October the 10th, in a matter of days, China also launched antitrust investigations into Qualcomm, the American company, for suspected violation of the country's anti-monopoly law. Professor Mahoney, are these what triggered the outburst of Trump's emotions or love for tariffs again?
Well, I think there are a couple of things at work here. The first is clearly there's been a tit for tat going on for some time. I think that there was hope that with some of the meetings that we saw initiated in Sweden and in Switzerland, that we were going to move sort of peacefully towards some sort of resolution, one that would see the leaders meeting soon at the end of the month at APEC, and that this all seemed to be sequenced so that Trump could secure a trade deal ahead of America's most consequential shopping season, starting with Black Friday the day after Thanksgiving in late November. So this is what I think everyone was hoping for. And then when we saw it going off the rails, I think that there was a sense in Beijing, given the negotiations, that things were not moving along, that things were not playing out in a way that was going to lead to this sort of eventual peaceful little meeting at APEC, and that timing favored Beijing. We did see the Beijing say that this is a passive defense. And I think that's certainly the case, but it's also being interpreted in the West as that China is taking a stronger stand, and I think the timing of this moment is one that favors China. Trump desperately needs a deal. He desperately needs to come up with something before we reach that difficult shopping season, because thus far the American economy was able to dodge a lot of the pain associated with the trade war, from various exemptions or pauses. Or the fact that a lot of sales were stockpiled earlier in the year, given the anticipation of this conflict. So we're now in a position where he needs a deal. He needs to be able to send Republicans home for Thanksgiving, to assure voters that they can go shopping. And so he's run out of time, and I think China realizes this. But at the same time, we have to understand that this issue with export controls related to rare earths, this is a concern that goes back in China to 2012. Certainly, we saw the law coming online in 2020, but it's increasingly the case that China is very much concerned that these rare earths are being used in weapons.
It seems that China has taken a rather quick-handed but very well-prepared complex of actions within a matter of days, right? First, China prepared for its international regulation governing shipping, and then it rolled out specific fees retaliating against US's port fees against China or China-related or China-built ships. And then China also, as I said, published 7 notices on the single day of October the 9th, including export controls, including battery-related items, including US port fees and the antitrust investigation against Qualcomm. Professor Zhang, what's the thinking behind China's behavior here?
I think, I want to mention 3 things. Number one is Chinese thinking that the core essence of all these measures is to protect the China's interest in the global market. We're talking about 7 measures, and all of them is, maximize the utility of, for us, I'm in Beijing, right? We think about China. We also think about the global balance, right? We want to be a responsible rising power, but we are very prepared this time. It's a large amount of regulations. And second thing I want to mention is the Chinese officials call this as a necessary act of passive defense.
Right.
Right. And the most of the measures are about the rare earth and about the port fees. See, they're not the same system of measures. For the rare earth, Professor Joseph already mentioned, it's for the national security concerns. It has been used strategically in the past. Now, for the port fee measures, it's more about reciprocal, reaction to what, United States put together in April. So those are completely 2 different types of tactics. So from this perspective, I do think China, in terms of how to fight this trade war, we are upgraded. We are more sophisticated. We're more skilled now. And number 3, and I also want to emphasize that we are doing all of these to protect the national interest, national security of Chinese firms. But more importantly, from my opinion, is we're not there at the final decision. We still hope that we can reach a balance that is beneficial for China as well as the whole world. So those are the things I want to mention.
Professor Liang, let me go to you. I mean, from the whole host of measures, it seems China is sending a very strong, very clear message. China is not afraid of trade war. China does not want to fight a trade war, but China is not afraid of it. But it seems more and more over the past months, actually years, a departure from the traditional Chinese, very measured, very subdued approach to a very resolute and sometimes, I would say, very assertive reaction to measures it considers to be bully, considers to be discriminatory. Professor Liang, how do you look at the messages about how China is facing up to the threats the U.S. is touting? Isn't China worried that these countermeasures are not going to invite more escalation from the U.S. side? For instance, the 100% tariff threat.
Right. Well, I think, first of all, these gestures or these measures reflect both the strategic but also tactical moves by China. From a strategic point of view, I think this countermeasures really shows that China is resolute, right, to defend its own interests, be it national security issues or its technological development, which from China's point of view is a legitimate right for China's development, and yet it's being derailed or being hampered by the United States. So from a strategic point of view, China needs to defend its long-term interest. From a technical point of view, I think this really shows that China says enough is enough, right? China is not afraid of having a trade war because China has been really enter all these 4 rounds of negotiations in good faith and really trying to abide by and follow up through all the agreements and reach the so-called common framework of consensus to have a trade negotiations and try to normalize trade relationships. But I think from China's point of view, what Washington has done in the past 20 days after the Madrid is that it is a escalation in the substantive level, but it also demonstrates that the United States has very minimum, even non-existent credibility. So in that case, China has to be more assertive to show that if you are continuing to act in an aggressive way, China has the way to fight back. And China has already accumulated a lot of experiences from the first Trump term's tariff war. So I think this is a way for China to show that they can use their economic might and use their legal means to really defend its interests and fight this trade war.
Well, you talked about the U.S.'s actions and measures since the Madrid consultations. Here is a quick summary of it. That's according to the Ministry of Commerce statement, which was released on Sunday, quite extraordinarily, right, over the weekend on October the 12th. And these measures, the Chinese measures, the statement refers to, are in reaction to a string of new restrictive measures targeting China, quote unquote, by the United States. These measures, for instance, the United States has put multiple Chinese entities on the entity list and special designated national list, arbitrarily expanded the scope of control over businesses with the affiliates rule that affects thousands of Chinese companies, and persisted with the implementation of a so-called Section 301 measures targeting China's maritime, logistics and shipbuilding industries in disregard of China's concerns and goodwill. Professor Mahoney, help us understand these measures on behalf of the United States. Why, right after the two sides reached some kind of, breakthrough in Madrid, the United States continued to churn out one after another of these measures targeting Chinese companies?
Well, that's the billion-dollar question, really. I think, again, to go back to what I was saying earlier, I think there was this hope that we would see the relationship sort of proceeding in a rather peaceful and not too vitriolic way, but we didn't, as you noted. And there are some questions here. The first question is, what is it? If we look, for example, at the way the United States responded to the SEO Plus and the military parade, the anniversary of the defeat of fascism, where we saw leaders from India, from Russia, from others coming to China, and we saw this idea that maybe something had fundamentally shifted in the strategic balance, particularly as India began to break away, it appears, from leaning towards the United States and being more inclined to cast its fate with Asia. And then we also saw Trump being frustrated in other efforts, for example, in the conflict in Ukraine, where we saw him pivoting to blaming that conflict remarkably on China and India, saying that the Chinese and Indian support of the Russian economy had made that war possible and was effectively perpetuating it. So I think there's been some distrust. Certainly, we have a profound trust gap existing between China and the United States, in so much as it's not clear that from the Chinese side that Trump is really sincere about reaching a deal. Although he desperately needs one, he also seems to be preparing for the possibility that there might be failure. And should there be failure, then we might see other escalations. So I think in this case, when we talk about a passive defense, what we're talking about is China trying to get ahead of. Certainly, there have been these actions, as you noted, the expansion of the entities list, and so forth and so on. But getting ahead of that, because China does need to put itself in a defensive position, because the U.S. may take other darker paths.
Professor Zhang Xiaoyan, let me go to you, because there seems to be an apparent logic hole here, loophole, if I may. Because during a phone call, right, the last time the two presidents called each other, China, of course, sent the same message. We want a good relationship with we want a stabilized relationship. Let's talk. Let's continue to do trade. And President Trump said that the U.S. hopes to maintain a long-term big and great relationship with China and hopes to promote bilateral trade and economic cooperation. So it seems that he has this will, and if he needs a deal to claim another win in front of his voters, why are they at the same time, or his cabinet, the ministries, rolling out these measures which are clearly not going to make China happy and willing to help Trump achieve a deal on trade, on the tariffs?
In economics, there is a term called repeated gain. Right now we're in the middle of a negotiation. The tariff decision will be made sometime soon. Before that decision being made, and everybody or players, two parties, normally would put together, all kind of tactics like the two professors before me has already mentioned. And on one side, the president would be saying that we want a long-term, big and beautiful relationship with China. We want to have this healthy trading relationship with everybody. But on the other hand, his officers may be doing something different. I think this is all of a big system. And eventually, before we sit on the table and decide on the final terms, we have to try all the possibilities. As United States, for the government and the president, they have to try every possibility and to maximize their utility in this game. And especially for President Trump, he thinks this is all about art of dealing, right? We're trying to make deals with everybody in the world. They have done this already with many other countries. Of course, U.S.-China relationship is the most important one in the global market. So they're playing more carefully with more measures and with more, more maneuvers. And that's what we're seeing right now. That's how I feel.
Professor Liang Yan, do you see this as a coordinated strategy or a tactic that the Trump administration is trying to place to gain an upper hand in the upcoming new round of consultation, or it's a complete lack of coordination? I mean, President Trump probably isn't even aware of the kind of legislations that's being prepared or measures that's being prepared by his ministries, and because he's very busy, and some people are saying he's not studying these measures in details, and he's probably unaware of the details of the kind of progress of these measures that are being rolled out. What is your guess?
Well, I would agree. I think the timing really indicates that Trump and the team maybe wanted to maximize their leverage coming into the negotiations. As we know, again, this is really his art of deal. That he basically always wanted to maximize the leverage and the pressure before a big sort of negotiations. But that said, I also think that within the Trump team, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of fractures, right? The China hawks may seem to want to take the opportunity to squeeze China even more, if you wanted to put it that way. And especially, I think, on the tech front, I think, from a systematic point of view, from a strategic point of view, the United States absolutely has the interest of suppressing China's technological development. And so that's why you're seeing all this emphasis on tech ban. And as we also know, in addition to all the measures the United States has done, putting Chinese firms on the entity list and so on and so forth, the House Selective Committee on China also tried to call for that allies should work together and up the game of banning chip machines from going to China. So I think it's very clear this has been the pattern, that this tech ban indicates that the United States is really trying all it can to maintain its technological supremacy and its hegemonic position. And I think that is very clear. And so I don't think that it's a coincidence. So again, I think there are both ways, right? One is an opportunistic way to say, maybe we can poke China without getting any consequences by increasing the ban and the restrictions, and China cannot do anything about it. But if China does fight back, then that's a time when they continue to exercise more pressure and bring that sort of negotiation in their favor.
So China rolled out this rare earth export control measures, which is supposedly very infuriating and surprising. Professor Mahoney, you were talking about this. How much do you think these measures will succeed in changing the behavior of the Trump administration ahead of the negotiations, if at all? And there was talk of the U.S. Trade representative trying to have a phone call with his Chinese counterpart. What is the consideration behind China putting the export control at this moment, saying it's not a ban, it's a control?
Well, again, I think that this is about timing. I think that Trump is backed into a corner. He needs a deal or some sort of major distraction before we get to Thanksgiving. And I think China is well aware of this. They're well aware of the fact that congressmen have to start campaigning for midterms after around the time of the holidays. And again, to go back to the idea of Christmas shopping, which is the biggest driver, one of the biggest drivers of the U.S. economy annually. But we know that China has resisted really upping the rare earths controls because we know that China does control the whole supply chain. We know that it controls substantially globally mining, separation, metallurgy, magnet production. And China has hesitated to implement strong controls because it knows that if it does that, then it will create the necessary market conditions that would maybe accelerate these types of developments, these type of mining in Australia, Vietnam, Myanmar, and other places. Although China also still has the advantage of the production. In other words, if those countries started mining, if they had the economic incentive to start mining, they would still probably have to ship them to China in order to be processed. So China has resisted using this tactic in so much as it understands that having interdependence is something that can promote balance and fairness in the international trading system. But now that we have reached this moment where Trump needs a deal, China is, I think, leveraging this power in a way that sort of maximizes their own negotiating position. I think this is why we saw the markets bounce in the U.S. Last week. And it's also why we saw overnight Trump praising President Xi and saying, yes, we're going to get a deal done, don't worry, and so forth and so on.
Finally, Professor Zhang, we don't have that much time left. I want to get your take on the rare earth export control regulation. China says it's not a ban, it's application. If people, legitimate exporters, if they file the application, they will get it granted. And also the use of the language Chinese in terms of the software that's being used in announcing this. Some people are making a point in that, saying, and all the future applications will have to be made in Chinese. And, you know, all of these are generating some talks. How do you look at this? China going further down and try to maximize the leverage of rare earths in terms of strengthening its negotiation position against the United States?
I have two reactions. Number one, I feel China's measure this time, if you look carefully at it, it's well crafted. So people need to, okay, for everybody here, you probably want to read into the regulation. It's not a ban, so don't overreact to it. My number two reaction is for a lot of documents in China, we do use Chinese. I also do not want people to overreacting to this. We have huge amount of population use Chinese on daily basis every day. So yeah,
maybe that's a little bit symbolic. You know, finally we are doing our talk. Right? Instead of talking about others, we want to have our agenda the centerpiece of the discussion. Time is so limited, we have to leave it there. A lot more needs to be discussed, but next time. Many thanks to Zhang Xiaoyan, Associate Dean of Tsinghua PBC School of Finance, Liang Yan, Kremer Chair, Professor of Economics at Willamette University, and Joseph Mahoney, Professor at East China Normal University. Thank you so much. And with that, we come to the end of this special edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and X using the handle Liu Xin in Beijing. On behalf of the whole team, thank you for watching. We've got The Point.